This is Federalist 15, Part 15, and we left off in the middle of 11th paragraph. That I read it for you, and I said, it's just a beautiful statement. I said, we'll come back and revisit it. So if you go to the 11th paragraph, and Hamilton, he says, this language at the present day would appear as wild as a great part of what we now hear from the same quarter will be thought, when we shall have received further lessons from that best oracle of wisdom, experience. Talks about experience as the best oracle, the best guide, the best thing that can tell you what the future will bring, because you have wisely looked at the past. And then it continues, it at all times betrayed an ignorance of the true springs by which human conduct is actuated, and belied the original establishment to the inducements to the establishment of civil power. Why has government been instituted at all? So look at human conduct in the past. When you look at history and see how humanity and human beings have misbehaved, broken laws, have taken away from others if they could, especially when they have power. See, they're very distrustful, and rightly so. They say, okay, human beings can be okay individually, but it's a whole other thing when you give them power, governmental power. That's when you have to watch out. That's when you have to be careful. That's why when he used civil power, he's talking about government, establishment of civil power. Why has government been instituted at all? Because the passions of men will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint. Unless there are rules and laws limiting people. When you says constrain, means put a limit on it. Then passions take over instead of reason. And their human conduct will be actuated by passions, by unreasonable things, things that are not good for them or their community in the long run. It says that's why we establish governments. And the government makes sure that the people don't break the law, and at the same time you establish the government in a way respecting these things so that the government will not go beyond its authority. So it's got to be a two-way situation. You have to have citizens that want to follow the law because of their education, because they want a better community, but they at the same time want laws that are fair, that are just, and that is for their long-term prosperity. And one thing that experience teaches us is that when human beings act as your legislators, as your judges, as your governors, as your presidents, if you do not give them limited authority, passions will take over them, and they will mistreat you. They will abuse the law. They will become tyrants. They'll become irresponsible. So it's a two-way deal, okay? A citizen has got to be law-abiding and wise, and the government has to know its limits. Because governments are formed of men, it's people who run the government. And we know Hamilton, Publius says people are corruptible. So you just can't imagine that they're not going to be corrupted. You have to imagine that they are going to be corrupted. That's why you frame a government with checks and balances, division of powers, independent judiciary, bicameral legislature. These are very important. And then he continues, has it been found that bodies of men act with more rectitude or greater disinterestedness than individuals? Look at history. A group of men, a group of people, have you ever found them to be better than one person just because it's a group of them? No, he says, you have to be careful because the passion takes over the group just like it does the individual. The contrary of this has been inferred by all accurate observers of the conduct of mankind. And he says, when you have observed and watched the conduct and behavior of mankind, it has shown us that groups of men act just as bad and sometimes worse than individuals. So, when you create a legislature, if it's a House of Representatives, have a Senate that if the Senate gets out of hand, wants to break the law, become irresponsible, maybe the House will check them. And vice versa. You have an independent judiciary to make sure that neither one of these get out of hand. You have division of powers so that there is a area of authority that the executive branch knows it's responsible for and not further. Judicial branch, the same thing. Legislative branch, the same thing. Then you check and balance them. For example, you balance one house against the other in a bicameral legislature. Okay? You allow one power to check the other power. Okay? If a president wants to get out of hand and break the laws, you allow the legislature to impeach the president. But to make sure that it is not done just because somebody has paid one part of the legislature off, you make sure that one house impeaches, indicts, and the other house finds him or her guilty. So this way it is not just done out of whim, out of passion, without thinking about it wisely. So you put all these balances in place because a group of men cannot be trusted. Just like a single man cannot be trusted with power when you give him power. And then he continues, and the influence is founded upon obvious reasons. Regard to reputation has a less active influence when the infamy of a bad action is to be divided among a number than when it is to fall singly upon one. This is a beautiful statement, because he says, watch. You have to watch the groups even more than you have to watch the individual, because if an individual makes a mistake, you can look at him or her, point your finger and say, you and alone you are responsible. But he says when men are in groups, like legislators or whoever, they're in groups, they can easily make mistake because they think, well, I alone am not going to be blamed. All of us are in this. Everybody in the House of Representatives voted for this. So they're all responsible. It's not just me. Or everybody in the Senate voted for it. It's all, I'm not responsible. Everybody else did it too. And you can easily look at history of countries, even United States, that the legislators were persuaded wrongly to vote for something, and they all did. Because they say, well, if I'm wrong, it's not just me that they're going to come and say, you were wrong. It's all of us, so I'm not going to be as guilty, or I'm not going to feel as bad. So Hamilton here says, be careful, because when a group has power, it's even dangerous than an individual. So it's be careful. And that's why he says a spirit of faction, which is apt to mingle its poison in the deliberations of all bodies, will often harry the persons of whom they're composed into improprieties and excesses for which they would have blush in a private capacity. Like lobbyists right now go and find a group of legislators, either in the state legislators here in the United States or inside the House of Representatives or the Senate. They lobby them, they pay them money, they fund their elections and all these things. And a faction takes over because a group of them will say, this is our interest, this person is spending money for us, they're bringing a factory to our district, and this way, instead of bribing us, they say we're creating jobs. So that way I will vote for what he wants, what the lobbyist wants, and I'm not the only one. A group of other people have done the same thing, because the lobbyist has done the same thing for the other members of that group. So just like you won't trust an individual who has power, who is in government, you definitely do not trust a group of people that might be exposed to faction, to a personal interest that will guide them rather than the interest of the community. That's why you have these in place, so you don't fall under the control of a tyrant or a group of oligarchs or tyrants, and you can live freely.